The Houthis right now are actually struggling because they don't have enough weapons because the Israelis have hit a lot of facilities that the Houthis rely on. This just tells you how even practically it will be hard for Iran to sustain at the same level the intensity of its engagements in Yemen, in Iraq, and other places. I think it's also an opportunity for the United States to encourage its allies to actually tackle the proxies once and for all. Especially, for example, the ones in Iraq and the dormant ones in Syria and the bigger ones in Lebanon and elsewhere. So I think it's a big opportunity, and it seems that the Middle East is going to shift in a way where the Islamic Republic simply does not have enough capacity to continue its project.
You're listening to East to West. I'm Sarah Martinez Amir, speaking to you from Jerusalem. On June 13th, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a multidimensional precision strike deep inside Iran that changed the balance of power in the Middle East. Now, this was not just another targeted strike. It was a coordinated full-spectrum disruption of Iran's military command, nuclear leadership, and psychological deterrence. Senior IRGC commanders and nuclear scientists were eliminated. Iran's missile defenses and early warning systems were rendered essentially useless. And perhaps most devastating of all, the attack came from inside the Islamic Republic's borders. Well, joining me today is Zineb Riboua. She's a research fellow at the Hudson Institute's Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East. We'll unpack what Rising Lion reveals about Iran's vulnerabilities, how Israel pulled off one of the most sophisticated deception campaigns in modern military history, and what this means for the US, the region, and the future of warfare. Zineb, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to the discussion.
So you've called Israel's Operation Rising Lion a case study in the art of deception. What were the key factors that allowed Israel to completely surprise the Islamic regime of Iran?
Well, I think that there were a few, I would say there are three main factors. The first one is when you're a leader, your number one job is to read the strategic environment and read it well. And it seems that at the time, Khamenei, for a very long time, misread the situation because Israel has always been kind of restrained by the United States, especially under Biden, especially under Obama. And he thought that Trump, because he said that negotiations with Iran will happen, and that's Trump. There were all these stories about Netanyahu not being aligned with Trump and Trump not being aligned with Netanyahu. And I think they thought that Israel will be restrained, and more than that, Trump gave them a deadline. They gave them a 60 days deadline. They did not take that seriously. They really thought they could buy time, play around, and not necessarily take it as seriously as they should, which is why the Israelis have started the operation on day 61st. And I think that these elements, especially on the U.S. foreign policy side, have definitely blurred the lines for Khamenei and for the Iranian regime. The other thing, and I think this is very, very important and has not been reported widely, but that the Middle East has been changing in a different way. China has been much more assertive in its role. They brokered the Saudi-Iran deal. They had this, part of this wave of reconciliation, they say, a diplomatic type of negotiation between Fatah and Hamas in Beijing. They've been very active. They've been sending to Iran all the chemicals they needed. They still bought oil from Iran despite the sanctions. And so the Iranians thought that China was reconfiguring a system through which Iran can sustain itself. and that parallel system was not in danger, especially because if you remember the Obama GCPOA and other things, there were two vocal countries against it, and it was Iran and Saudi Arabia. And what the Chinese have been able to do is to neutralize Saudi Arabia's voice. That the Saudis will be very concerned about Iran acquiring nuclear weapons, but that, the worst case scenario, they would say that they want nuclear weapons as well. And so I think Iranians thought that apart from the Israelis, the region would just accept as a fait accompli all of what they've been doing. Of course, there were also big mistakes that they have not rectified. The first one was the pagers attack on Hezbollah. They have not seen that as I think they saw it as a case on its own. That it did not really touch them. That it was Hezbollah's fault, something of this sort. And also, the collapse of Assad should have been seen by Iran as a big deal. Why? Because they need Syria for a lot of the operations that they conducted and that they against Israel. They did not find any plan B for that. It seemed that they were just unprepared. But I think that the worst part here is that the Israelis took out Haniyeh inside Tehran. And it means that they did that as a signal, but also they would have never done it without immense intelligence, infiltration, without immense access to resources, to human assets. And it's been and it seems that they completely misread the situation at an unbelievable level.
So you mentioned the killing of Haniyeh in Tehran. It was just a year ago, a few months later, the Beeper operation in Lebanon, essentially neutralizing or heavily wounding Hezbollah. What does that say about the superiority of Israel's intelligence operation agency, the Mossad, over the past year and a half, and how it has paralyzed Iran psychologically?
I get this question all the time of, maybe Iran can do something. Maybe Iran now, they can retaliate and they can hit Israelis harder, etc. But as you just said, they've been paralyzed because Israel really hit not just the IRGC, the scientists, the top heads that work with Khamenei. They really hit the command and control of the IRGC. And that means that they hit the nerve. And it's very hard for any regime, whether even the most sophisticated one, to get over that very quickly. And I think this proves how far actually the Israelis went. The fact that they were able to have workshops inside Iran, in Tehran, working on launching drones. That's quite amazing. But from what I gather is that there's something people don't remember. And it's that Israel, if you remember when they went and they stole and they gathered all the nuclear documents of Iran, and then it's thanks to that they knew that they were working on one. Of course, they shared that, and Netanyahu shared that, and they said that Iran was lying. But it seems that since then they've been gathering information little by little. And there were also some cracks in the Islamic Republic. The first one was that if you remember the protests, etc., the repression, how it seemed that of course they were very close to getting overthrown, but they were also very close to not being able to tame the population. So it seems that they already revealed that the people are not with them. And that gives Israel immense advantage in infiltrating. The second thing is they're very reliant on. I think they don't read the U.S. press as they should. I think they get deceptive. It's very easy to deceive them. And I think the Israelis understood that. For example, the fact that they launched that operation when there was the parade in DC, and that Trump was going to be there, and then Netanyahu said that he's going to see his son for the wedding, and they were tracking all of these things, and they thought that, yeah, nothing will happen. And I think I think this is why it's such a successful operation. The deceptive part is amazing.
How has this conflict affected Iran's credibility here in the Middle East?
At an immense level. The fact that Hezbollah does not want to join in helping Iran against Israel, that even China, of course I don't think they can join militarily, but they can at least show solidarity, have like a circus of anti-Western, anti-America campaign. They did not do that. The Russians, they even are they're trying to talk to Khamenei and tell him, please take the deal. So I think that it is damaging them on a great power competition level with China and Russia and the bloc they were trying to construct, but also at a deeper level because the Islamic Republic is a regime that depends on having proxies. It is a revolutionary regime at heart, and they need to export the revolution. So they will have proxies all over in Africa, in the Middle East, and they often replicate themselves, duplicate what they do, and that's how they grow. And I think that now, because the Islamic Republic looks weak, um, they will have a lot of more trouble in recruiting and convincing others that they can protect them, especially when they can't protect themselves.
So that leads me to my next question. What does this mean for the future of the so-called axis of resistance?
And this is my prediction here is that it will lead to a slow disintegration. It's inevitable. The fact that the Houthis right now are actually struggling because they don't have enough weapons, and because the Israelis have hit a lot of facilities that the Houthis rely on. I think this just tells you how even practically it will be hard for Iran to sustain at the same level the intensity of its engagements in Yemen, in Iraq, and other places. I think it's also an opportunity for the United States to encourage its allies to actually tackle the proxies once and for all. Especially, for example, the ones in Iraq and the dormant ones in Syria and the bigger ones in Lebanon and elsewhere. So I think it's a big opportunity, and it seems that the Middle East is going to shift in a way where the Islamic Republic simply does not have enough capacity to continue its project.
So you mentioned the Middle East and how there's going to be a shift in alliances and adversaries. I'm curious to hear from you. How does the Middle East and the different players within this region, this very tumultuous region, how do they view this conflict when we're comparing, for example, the MENA area versus the Gulf countries? How are they viewing Iran, and has Israel shifted regional calculations here?
Look, I think that Israel is attractive because it's strong. Israel is seen as a strategic partner for so many countries precisely because it can do things like this and can perform at a military level that is absolutely absolutely amazing. And I think this is something that people forget, that Israeli performance is exactly what makes it attractive. And because there were a lot of normalization deals that happened through the Abraham Accords and elsewhere, but there are also other ones that were coming, and they did not happen for various reasons, precisely because of U.S. policy. But this is the time where I think a lot of them are looking at this and are making the simple, pragmatic calculus: which side I want to be on. I do not want to be with the losing side, and Israel is on the winning side. And also the fact that these proxies have brought nothing but misery to the Middle East. A lot of these governments, the Iraqis and others, always struggled with this. So for them, I think they see it as an opportunity. But I also think that because we don't know yet if Khamenei is going to take a deal or not, and we don't know how far the Khamenei is going to try to sustain his position, this is a dangerous, I think, spot right there. Because if they take the route of jihad and martyrdom and go crazy, an Islamic Republic collapse will be imminent. And that's where, and I think this is where a lot of the governments in the Middle East are really thinking very hard of the day after.
Speaking of the day after, we've talked about the position of all these different Middle Eastern countries, and of course we've spoken on East-West with different Iranian activists abroad. But I'm curious to hear from you about what the Iranian people inside Iran, a very diverse population, many of whom still do support the Islamic Republic's regime. How are they interpreting this moment versus the regime's official narrative? Does the narrative match what's actually being discussed on the street? We know that after the women life freedom movements, many within the younger generation are against the regime, but I'm curious to hear about the rest of the population.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question because we do not have access to what they actually think. There's a lot of disinformation out there. There's a lot of, fake campaigns. It's very hard. But what I can say though is that, as you said precisely, the youth is definitely against this, and they do matter because if you remember one of the Khomeini's speeches when he just arrived to Tehran, that that it's really the youth, the students who are the core of and the center of the revolution, and I think the Islamic Republic just lost them. That being said, there's also the potential of other separatist groups. There's the Baluch and some others. They've been repressed by the regime for a very long time. We don't know where they're going to stand on this one. I think it's going to be just a very difficult situation to assess, at least for me. But I think there's such a deep disappointment and resentment by Iranians that I think they've lost hope for a very long time on the Islamic Republic ability to reform or anything.
Zineb Riboua, thank you very much for your fantastic analysis today and breaking down the situation between Iran and Israel. It's certainly going to be a very interesting couple of days, weeks ahead of us, but that have immense potential consequences for not only for Iran and the region, but the entire world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.